I was sitting with my coffee this morning, just scrolling through the news feeds, the usual mix of AI breakthroughs, biotech updates, all of it.
Hmm.
And I just felt this incredibly familiar wave of, I don't know, exhaustion. Do you know that feeling?
Oh, absolutely. The doom scrolling fatigue is real.
It's not just the amount of news, though. It's the way we talk about it. It feels like we're stuck in this endless binary loop.
Yes.
On one side, you have the people screaming, ban it all immediately, it's going to destroy the world. And on the other, you've got the accelerationists shouting, let it rip, stop standing in the way of progress.
It is polarized to the point of paralysis.
Exactly.
Mm.
It feels like there's zero room for common sense anymore. It's either total prohibition or total anarchy.
Mhm.
And honestly, it drives me crazy because the world is just rarely that black and white.
Well, it's exhausting, but what you're identifying is it's actually a systemic issue. It's a symptom of what we might call binary governance.
Binary governance.
Yeah, our current systems, our laws, our corporate policies, even just the way we debate on social media, they're all designed for yes or no answers.
Right.
They're great for clear-cut decisions like, is this bridge safe? Or is this food additive toxic? But when you apply that rigid binary framework to general purpose technologies that are evolving at light speed, like AI or synthetic biology, the system just breaks.
That makes total sense. It feels like we're trying to regulate the internet using a rule book written for the steam engine.
It's a perfect analogy.
The tools just don't match the job.
And that friction, that massive gap between our binary tools and our, nuanced problems is exactly why I'm so excited about the material we're covering today.
Okay.
We're taking a deep dive into the latest installment from the Science of Responsible Innovation series by Alexander Titus. This was just published on the Connected Ideas Project, January 31st, 2026.
I love this series. They always manage to take these massive, headache-inducing policy problems and just break them down into something that actually makes sense.
Yeah.
And this specific piece is crucial. Titus is tackling a concept he calls zones of proportionality.
Okay.
It's essentially a framework to stop treating every single tech risk as if it's the same and to restore what he calls the lost middle of governance.
The lost middle. I like that. It sounds like a fantasy novel, but it's actually exactly what we need in policy. So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack these zones.
Right.
We're going to look at how we can move away from that paralyzing ban versus boon debate and actually categorize technology based on reality, not just hype or fear.
Exactly. We need to move from emotional reactions to engineering solutions.
But before we get to the solution, these zones, we need to define the problem better.
Mm-hmm.
Titus talks about something called governance flattening. Now, when I hear flattening, I think of pancakes, which is nice, but I assume that's not what he means here.
Unfortunately, no pancakes involved.
Yeah.
Governance flattening is what happens when we lose the ability to distinguish between different kinds of risk. When a regulatory system can't see the gradients, the shades of gray, everything gets flattened into one of two categories: forbidden or inevitable.
So if a regulator looks at a chatbot and they can't tell the difference between one that's writing a silly limerick and one that's
Giving out prescription medical advice, they panic.
organic.
And they treat them both as high risk. And that leads to two very bad outcomes. First, caution turns into paralysis. You end up banning the harmless stuff just to be safe.
Right.
Or, on the flip side, ambition turns into defiance. If innovators feel like the regulations are just stupidly heavy-handed, they stop listening entirely.
Right. They just say, well, if you're going to punish me anyway, I might as well do whatever I want.
Exactly. We lose control because we tried to control too much. Titus argues that to govern proportionally, we have to stop sorting tech by how scary the headlines are. Instead, we need to ask three very specific, almost engineering-like questions.
Yeah. Let's break these down. What are the three questions?
First, how severe is the potential harm? That's the obvious one. Does it hurt feelings or does it hurt bodies?
Standard risk assessment. Got it.
But the second one is, I think, the real game changer in this framework. How reversible are the consequences?
Reversibility. That feels like a concept we do not talk about enough.
We really don't. I mean, in software, we're spoiled. If you push bad code, you hit undo, you roll back the update.
Sure.
In biology or large-scale ecological interventions, there is no control Z. If you release an invasive species or a self-replicating pathogen, you can't just patch it later.
That is a terrifying but very necessary distinction. So severity and reversibility. What's the third?
The third is coupling. How tightly coupled is the system to everything else?
Okay, what does that mean?
If this technology fails, does it fail alone? Or does it trigger a domino effect that crashes the power grid, the financial markets, or healthcare system?
Okay, so we have severity, reversibility, and coupling. Titus takes these three dials and uses them to build this zones of proportionality system. It sounds simple: green, orange, red like a traffic light.
It does.
But as I was reading this, I realized the nuance isn't just in the colors, it's in the mindset you have to adopt for each one. So let's walk through them. Let's start with the happy place, the green zone.
The green zone. This is the domain of what Titus calls permissionless innovation.
Permissionless innovation. That phrase is music to a startup founder's ears. It sounds like freedom. But I assume this isn't just the purge for tech, right?
No, it is certainly not anarchy. To be in the green zone, a technology must have low severity of failure, high reversibility, and it must be well contained. If something goes wrong here, it's a localized glitch, not a global catastrophe.
Can you give us some concrete examples from the source? Because I think people hear green zone and assume we're just talking about video games or something.
It's much more than that. I mean, high-tech, cutting-edge science can be in the green zone. Think about an AI system used purely for hypothesis generation.
Yeah.
Let's say you have an AI suggesting 10,000 potential new molecules for a drug. It isn't making the drug. It isn't injecting it into a patient. It is just brainstorming on a digital whiteboard.
So if the AI suggests a molecule that's actually toxic, nobody dies. The scientist just looks at it and says, bad idea, and deletes it.
Exactly. Another crucial category here is in silico simulations.
And just to make sure everyone's on the same page, in silico basically means it's done on a computer, not in a living thing.
Right. Imagine you are simulating a biological process on a server. If that simulation crashes, or if the code creates a digital virus inside the simulation, nobody gets sick, the server might crash, you reboot it. The failure is completely reversible.
So the philosophy in the green zone is basically break things, learn from it, rinse, repeat.
Titus puts it beautifully in the article. He says in the green zone, failures are treated as signals, not scandals.
I love that. Signals, not scandals.
They're just data points to learn from.
And the governance style reflects that, right? It's lightweight.
It has to be. Monitoring in the green zone should focus on performance and reliability, not, safety policing. The key insight Titus offers here, and this is something policymakers often miss, is that over-governing the green zone isn't being extra safe. It's actually waste.
Because you're slowing down the good stuff for no reason.
You are incurring an immense opportunity cost. If you put heavy red tape around a cancer research simulation that literally cannot hurt anyone, you aren't saving lives. You are delaying the cure. It is bureaucracy masquerading as caution.
That is such a critical distinction. We think more rules equals more safety, but here more rules just equals slower progress. Okay, so green is easy, fast, safe to fail, permissionless. Now let's move to the tricky part. The messy middle, as I like to call it, the orange zone.
The orange zone. This is where the rubber meets the road. Titus argues that the most consequential technologies we are dealing with right now, the things changing our lives today, live here.
And what defines them?
These are systems with moderate to high potential harm, but they are only partially reversible. And they are non-trivially coupled to other systems.
Non-trivially coupled. That is such a polite way of saying, if this breaks, it's going to make a really big mess for a lot of people.
Exactly. It's not a contained sandbox anymore.
So what technologies are we looking at here?
We are talking about AI systems that are influencing medical diagnoses or financial decisions. They aren't just brainstorming anymore. They are advising a doctor on treatment or approving a mortgage.
Right.
If the AI is biased or wrong, a real person suffers real harm. It's not the apocalypse, but you can't just reboot a misdiagnosis.
And I imagine this is also where physical automation comes in.
Yes. Autonomous systems in bounded environments. Think of a robot in a warehouse. It's heavy machinery moving on its own.
Sure.
It can hurt a worker if it malfunctions, so the severity is real. But it's not going to escape the warehouse and take over the city.
This also feels like the home of dual-use tools, which is a term that keeps coming up in this series.
That is a huge part of the orange zone. Dual use means a tool that has legitimate beneficial uses but can easily be misused. Think of a code generation AI. It can help you write better software, or it can help a hacker write malware.
This feels like the zone where most of our societal anxiety comes from. Because it isn't harmless, but it also isn't an existential threat. So how do you govern that? You can't let it rip, but banning it seems insane.
Correct. And this is where the binary system fails us most. The orange zone demands what Titus calls active stewardship. It isn't about yes or no, it's about how.
What does active stewardship look like in practice? It sounds like a lot of meetings.
It might be, but specifically, it requires mechanisms like human in the loop or human on the loop.
Let's distinguish those two because people mix them up.
Sure, human in the loop means the system cannot act without a human pressing approve. The AI suggests something, the doctor signs off. Human on the loop means the system acts automatically, but a human supervisor is watching and can intervene immediately.
So essentially supervision.
Supervision and, crucially, rollback pathways. You need a big red emergency stop button. And you need auditability. We need to be able to look back and see why the system made the decision it did.
Okay.
If we can't explain the failure, we shouldn't be deploying it in the orange zone.
It sounds like the orange zone is uncomfortable because it resists those absolutes we talked about. It requires judgment. It requires actual work.
It does. And Titus points out that most governance failures happen right here. We misclassify. We either treat an orange technology as green, ignoring the risks, like with early social media, or we panic and treat it as red, trying to ban something that could be incredibly beneficial if we just managed it correctly.
We're so bad at the middle ground that we force these nuanced technologies into the extremes. Speaking of extremes, let's talk about the red zone. The tone of the article really shifts here.
It does. In the red zone, the margin for error is effectively zero. We are dealing with high severity, low reversibility technologies. Titus is very clear. Once these are released, the harm cannot be easily undone.
The effects just propagate.
Across ecosystems, across borders.
This is the stuff of sci-fi nightmares, but it's becoming real science. What are the specific examples here?
We're talking about capabilities that enable large-scale biological harm. Think accessible, untraceable pathogens, or systems that can autonomously design and deploy irreversible interventions in the environment like unauthorized geoengineering.
Or technology that concentrates overwhelming power.
Right. If a system allows one person to crash a global financial market or take down a national power grid with minimal accountability, that is a red zone risk.
So, move fast and break things is definitely not the motto here.
Speed is the enemy here. The objective is containment. Governance in the red zone isn't about optimizing. It's about strict access controls, non-proliferation norms. It's similar to how we treat nuclear material. You don't just buy plutonium on Amazon.
There was a quote in the source that really stuck with me here. Titus writes, "Red zone governance is not anti-innovation. It is pro-survivability."
It's a powerful reframing, isn't it? We often hear tech evangelists say that any regulation stifles innovation. But preventing an irreversible global catastrophe isn't stifling innovation. It's ensuring there's a civilization left to innovate.
So we have these three zones: green for permissionless experimentation, orange for active stewardship, watch closely, verify, and red for strict containment. It makes perfect sense on paper. But what happens when we get this wrong? What happens when proportionality collapses?
This is perhaps the most urgent warning in the article. When the zones collapse, you get a worst of both worlds scenario. If you treat green tech like it's red, if you bury basic research and paperwork, you choke off all the experimentation.
You kill the golden goose.
Exactly. But the reverse is even scarier.
Oh.
If you force orange tech into binary decisions, or if you ban things that shouldn't be banned, you get what Titus calls innovation flight.
Innovation flight. That implies the tech doesn't disappear, it just moves.
It moves. If a country imposes blanket bans on an orange zone technology because they're treating it like it's a red zone threat, the innovation doesn't stop. It just goes to a jurisdiction with weaker oversight. It goes to a data haven or a country that prioritizes speed over safety.
So instead of having safe, regulated development of these powerful tools here under our values and our laws, you have them being developed in a lawless environment somewhere else.
Precisely. You end up with fragile oversight, which is the exact opposite of what responsible innovation demands. By trying to be too safe everywhere, you end up being safe nowhere. We lose our seat at the table.
That is a chilling thought. It really highlights why getting that messy middle right is so important. We have to keep the innovation here under our stewardship, not push it into the shadows.
Right.
Now, before we wrap up, there's one more layer to this that I think makes it really robust. These zones aren't static, are they?
No, and that's a critical feature. It's dynamic. Technologies migrate between zones.
Give us an example of how something moves. How does a regulator know when to switch the color of the light?
Well, think about a green zone research tool. It starts as a small simulation on a university server. Harmless, but then it scales up. Suddenly, it's being used by millions of people to make decisions. It migrates from green to orange because the coupling and severity just went way up.
And it could go the other way, right?
Yeah.
A red risk can become orange.
Absolutely. This is the hopeful part. A red zone risk might move toward orange if we develop better containment or better antidotes. If we figure out how to make a dangerous biological technology reversible, if we invent the cure alongside the pathogen, it becomes manageable.
So it moves out of the red zone.
Right. So, responsible by design, which is the theme of this whole series, isn't a one-time stamp you put on a product.
It's a process.
It's a continuous process. You don't classify once and walk away. You have to constantly reassess based on evidence. Has this scaled? Is this safer than we thought? It requires institutions that can learn.
Which brings us back to why binary governance is so broken. It can't learn, it just says yes or no. It's static.
Exactly. We need a system that evolves as fast as the technology does.
Okay, let's bring this all home. We've covered a lot of ground governance flattening, the three zones, innovation flight. This whole discussion from the Science of Responsible Innovation series really changes the way you look at the headlines. What's the big takeaway for us?
I think it means we need to change the conversation. Governance intensity must scale with risk, not with rhetoric. We need to stop shouting about whether technology is broadly good or evil and start doing the hard, boring work of classification.
Right.
Green needs permission. Orange needs stewardship. Red needs constraint.
And realizing that doing the hard work of classifying these things actually allows us to disagree productively.
That's the key. Zones don't eliminate disagreement. We will still argue about whether a specific AI tool is green or orange, but that is a productive argument. We're arguing about evidence, about reversibility, about coupling.
Those are solvable problems.
They are. Arguing for abstract moral absolutes, that usually isn't solvable.
It turns a culture war into an engineering problem. I love that.
Precisely.
You know, there was one final thought in the source material that I found really provocative. I want to leave our listeners with this. Titus mentions that we are currently living through a moment where humanity itself is the experiment.
Yes. It's a sobering thought.
It really is. We are the test subjects. And if we treat every risk as equal, if we panic about the chatbots writing poetry while ignoring biological labs with no oversight, we aren't being safe. We are blinding ourselves to the specific dangers that actually matter. We need to respect the zones if we want the experiment, meaning us to succeed.
Well said. It's about being smart, not just being loud.
Exactly. Thank you so much for walking us through this. This was a true deep dive into the mechanics of safety.
My pleasure. It's a topic we can't afford to ignore.
And thank you for listening. We'll catch you in the next deep dive.